Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Adrian, I'm from Spain and I'm a polyglot. I also teach conversational lessons in different languages, so you can check that out down below. This is a podcast for language learning. Here I discuss interesting and meaningful topics for you guys learning a language and also improve your listening skills. If you are interested, you can also find this episode in Spanish, Chinese, German, and Russian. You can find the links down below in the description and on my website. Hope you enjoyed this episode. So, today I'll be going over how I learned Chinese by myself, how I passed the HSK 4 exam last year, which is pretty much around intermediate level or high intermediate, I'll say. I'll also discuss and explain briefly why I believe that Chinese is actually relatively easy to learn. Chinese is actually my sixth foreign language, and as strange as it may sound, it turned out to be, as I said, basically the easiest language out of the ones I learned. Because, as we all know, Chinese is considered one of the hardest languages to learn, but I want to clarify that this applies to people who aim to speak pretty much like native speakers. If you guys are looking to reach somewhere of an intermediate level, conversational level, and you'll be satisfied with it, then it's relatively fast and simple to get there. So, around the beginning of 2023, I decided to start with Chinese since I had already been learning Russian for around a year and a half, almost 2 years, and I was already quite happy with it, to be honest. So, I set myself the goal to learn Chinese as quickly as possible. And why I decided to learn Chinese? Well, for me, one of the most important criteria when it comes to learning a new language uh, is actually the number of people who speak that language. And as you guys know, more than a billion people speak Chinese, so the choice was actually quite easy. Although I had some doubts since everyone was saying like it's impossible to learn, it's gonna take a lifetime, you should pick a different language and so on. To be honest, I couldn't be bothered by such people. So right at the very beginning, I decided to start right away with the pinyin system. If you guys don't know, that's basically the Latin alphabet to be able to read Chinese characters and be able to pronounce them in an easier way. And since Spanish is my native language, it was quite a struggle. Although not because of the famous tones, which in my opinion are nowhere nearly as scary as people say, but rather because of the number of new and different sounds that are not in Spanish, Russian, or any of the languages I had studied before. Once I was done with the pinyin system, I decided to immediately start watching cartoons, like different videos, series, and so on. Don't worry too much if you are not able to understand a whole lot at the beginning. That's how it's supposed to be. Just make sure you are checking the subtitles and just let your brain do the work. The main thing is that you enjoy whatever you are watching, and after a while, the language will come to you intuitively. If you guys are wondering why I specifically said cartoons, it's just because of the fact that they are made for children for the most part, and the vocabulary is relatively easier, and so is the grammar. But just as a heads up, you guys have to remember and keep in mind that self-studying is quite a long process. You have to put a lot of hours. So I studied around 2 to 3 hours every day, sometimes even more. Just to put this into perspective, to reach a fluent level of Mandarin Chinese, you need to reach around 2,500 hours of study time. Just so you guys understand, that's basically 2 years of studying every day, 3 hours a day. Not to say that if you study 1 hour a day, even less, that's gonna take up to 8 years. I've done the math right now, and it literally takes up to 8 years. So that's why I highly encourage that you should incorporate the language into your daily life, daily routine, and try to do this while doing other stuff. So basically, multitasking is extremely important. Just try to listen to podcasts, listen to at least like whatever music you like in your target language. Do that while you are doing other stuff, like for example, while you are walking to work, while you are driving, while you are cooking something, whatever it may be. Just try to incorporate the language you are learning. Okay, now I actually want to explain how I divided my time in the beginning and later on when I was preparing for the HSK4 exam. So, as I said before, this exam is around intermediate level. I wouldn't say advanced yet. I hope that by now my Chinese is already at advanced level since it's been a year since I did the exam. So, the first resource I actually want to recommend is called Anki. I'm sure you guys already heard of it, But if not, it's basically a flashcard app. So what that means is that you just learn new vocabulary through it and also further review the other words and vocab you already learned in the past. It's just an improved way of memorizing words instead of the classical standard way of writing everything down. This one is only available for computers as far as I know, so if you want to download one in your phone, you can use another one called Memrise. Both are basically the same, so you can decide yourself which one to use. And by the way, all the resources I mentioned, you can find them down below in the description. Moving on to the next one, I highly recommend you guys try Language Reactor. That's basically a Google Chrome extension. Although there is also an app, but in my opinion, it's much better to just use the extension. So what it does is that it gives you a dual subtitle interface where you can just hover your mouse over any word and it will just give you right away the translation. And then what you can do with it is also like save the new words you learn and review them and after do flashcards with them. It's just a great way to learn a language while you are enjoying your favorite video series or whatever it may be. Okay, so moving into reading, we already covered the vocabulary and the listening. You can use the apps I mentioned before for that. For reading, I genuinely think that the best method is just reading very extensively, a huge amount of books, preferably graded readers. Those are the ones that are made for people that are specifically learning a new language. They are designed in a way that they contain very basic vocabulary, grammar, and it's a great way to develop your reading skills. You can also use them if you are at a higher level, they'll go all the way up to C2. So just make sure to find the appropriate one for you. That was actually the first Chinese book I read was The Little Prince, specifically made and graded for H2 level, which was great. So all the resources I mentioned can be used for basically any language. They are not specific for Chinese, but the one I'm gonna mention now is specifically targeted to those that are learning Chinese. It's a dictionary called Pleco. So the Pleco dictionary is great. It has pretty much everything you can look for. You can like handwrite the characters, you can check the pronunciation, check slang, check how the characters are written, like the strokes. It's great. It has everything you can ask for. Now, moving on to speaking practice. One method that really helped me, and I'm sure you guys already know, or at least have heard of it, it's called shadowing. That's basically repeating after native speakers. So the idea behind it is actually quite logical. It's just mimicking and quite literally shadowing the person you're listening to. It's basically as if you become the shadow of that person and you're gonna speak the exact way as he or she does. So you wanna copy both intonation, rhythm, pronunciation, absolutely everything. You wanna sound exactly like the person on the video or the podcast you are listening to. It's very useful and just overall very fun way to develop pretty much all of the skills that there are in language learning because you are practicing both listening, speaking out loud. You can also read the transcript of the podcast of whatever video you chose. So it's an overall great way of doing it. If you are not quite comfortable yet for that, you can just choose very simple, short, slow audios and just repeat them aloud. If not, you can just go to the YouTube settings or whatever app you're using and just make sure to reduce the speed, slow it down a bit. And by the way, you shouldn't be thinking about like the translation, the meaning of the words or anything, or the grammar, or whether you are making mistakes or not. It's not important in this case. We are purely focusing on the pronunciation. This does not, however, only help with pronunciation, but rather with everything concerning speaking skills, just really activating your tongue muscles, getting your mouth used to the new sounds and the new language. Just overall a great way of practicing. Concerning the actual exam, I did it in May of last year. I passed it with a 250 score. In order to pass the exam, you need to get at least 180 out of 300 score. So overall, it went very smoothly and I have no complaints about it. Both the listening and reading were relatively easy for me. Since I had practiced daily, I was pretty much used to it, so went very well. The writing, on the other hand, was much harder. There was one exercise where you have to organize the words correctly in different sentences, and I hadn't practiced that quite a lot, so I struggled a bit. Finally, for the speaking part, I didn't prepare much to be honest and got a bit confused at first. There was one task where you had to immediately repeat out loud the phrases you are given. Luckily, though, as I already mentioned before, the shadowing method quite literally saved me because without that, there is no way I would have been able to pass the speaking part. So that's all for today. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And remember, you can listen to the same episode in Spanish, German, Russian, and Chinese. Links are in the description down below and on my website. Until the next one.